If you ask most people in the UK today, they will tell you that the most definitive version of The War of the Worlds is Jeff Wayne's musical. And yes, whilst it is certainly influential, it has had somewhat of a bit of a chokehold on other adaptions of the novel. Legal issues aside, which have been both controversial and ridiculous at times, the musical has somewhat been of an issue of contention for most creatives. And that was until the novel fell into public domain not so long ago, and has seen quite a resurgence of interest in the book and its subsequent adaptation since, not thanks in part to the BBC and Fox productions of the same name. Make no mistake, the original musical is a masterpiece. It's had an undeniable influence on my childhood and my interest in the novel itself for quite some time, but by no means, and Jeff Wayne fans are going to hate me for this, is it definitive. What it is saturated media. From the original LP, to games, to flash games, endless adaptions of the original musical, 3 different single releases of The Eve of the War composed and performed in different formats from the original to disco, to even flash USB ports, crappy cell phone games, and an interactive experience to boot. It is nonetheless super saturated, and as much as I hate to be the one to say it, Jeff Wayne's only real success story, so it's understandable why he'd want to keep some control over that cash cow. But it's not the best, and so I thought, given the controversy surrounding this subject, I'd introduce 3 adaptations that I feel are better than the Jeff Wayne musical. I'm sure some of you will agree with me. I'm sure Jeff Wayne diehard fans will violently disagree with me. But this is my opinion, and on this show, it's the only one that counts, and anyone who disagrees with me is an overturned sausage roll who thought it was diving into mustard but discovered it was marmalade instead. Seriously, where do I come up with this shit?
Damn it! What the devil is that thing?
In 2017, a small studio did something very ambitious, a faithful audio reenaction of the original novel. And for all its limited budget and small studio foundations, this is very impressive. It's a slow start, yes, but when it gets into the grit of the story itself, the sound and acting keeps you glued to your headphones from start to finish. How they got the resources together to create something that engulfed me so much is in itself astounding. It's not a rock opera, It's a literal horrific personal encounter with the march of Martian death itself. They didn't spare any expense on presentation either, from a special hardback collector's edition to a USB edition and a marketing campaign to rival the likes of Big Finish itself, who themselves did an adaptation as a side note, which whilst good, simply doesn't offer the impact this production delivers. Sherwood Studios is young, but is still marketing this goodie which deserves any fan of the book's support. And unlike Jeff Wayne's adaptation, hits all the right chords, doesn't deviate that much from the source material, and doesn't try to appease you with overreaching promises and plans that don't reach fruition. I'm working on a bigger review for this production, but that's taken some time as I struggle more with audio reviews than I do with film reviews. But I'll be frank, I listen to this more with relish than I do to the musical itself. And if you have to choose between this and the audible Jeff Wayne drama, trust me, you'll be less bored with this adaptation than that overbearing travesty, which sadly, in comparison to this Sherwood production, had no soul.
Wait, love, wait, love, wait, love, until the war is over. And oh, at night, with heart set free, when the fight was over.
In 1965, a film crew captured the memories of the last living survivor of the war between Earth and Mars that took place at the turn of the 20th century. This is a motion picture presentation of that eyewitness account.
It's the scientific discovery of our time.
The men from the stars, the creatures from the heavens.
They're coming!
They make them here. We have many.
Envious eyes.
War of the Worlds, the true story.
Timothy Hines' original 2005 War of the Worlds film was ambitious to say the least, with a promised budget that never came through, a backlog of investors, people with good intentions but bad practices advising the fledgling director, and pressure from a fan base that in one instance involved the stalking of the director and his family to the extent of hacking his phone. Tim, or Timbo, as the old Pro Board forums were so often fond of calling him, was the face of the production. But oftentimes we forget that the face of the production isn't the power behind the production. The face isn't the final word behind the production, and so he sat there in silence as his dream project was divided by the fans and derailed by those in authority. He often jokes to me today about how much he enjoyed the Thomas the Tank Engine jokes, the Black Moon parodies, and the Honest trailer about there being a heck of a lot of walking.
War of the Worlds, the Walking Around in Fields edition.
And I'm told that it wasn't him who sought to silence the critics. He and I both agree that mockery is both a good source of inspiration and to be encouraged. And try as he might to make the masterpiece he always wanted, he was stuck with the reality of film production when in the hands of richer men, they will always agree that any film was good enough as long as it brought money into the distributors. And while many naysayers were claiming they could make a better film, they didn't. For all their talk and boasts of being something they were not one of them made a better film. Or made a War of the Worlds film for that matter. The only person to make a better War of the Worlds film than Timothy Hines was, ironically, Timothy Hines himself. War of the Worlds, the true story, basically re-edits everything from the original film into a masterpiece mockumentary surrounding the interview of the last survivor of the Martian invasion, knitted together with found footage declassified from British vaults. The effects were updated and spliced with footage from Pendragon's original film and old film to create a very powerful and moving piece that emotionally grabs you from start to finish, and it's worthy of every award it received, and Hines deserves much praise for creating a magnus opus out of what, to all intents and purposes, was originally a disaster. Even his most vile critics could not help but be impressed by this work, which speaks volumes for the man's ability not only to adapt, but to persevere. I put this on the list for several reasons. 1. Fans of the Great Martian War take heed. Tim did it first, and he did it more realistically with half the budget. 2. I'm emotionally invested in the survivor story. It's not a mere narration of doom and gloom. It's a genuine retelling of his experiences which will genuinely make you cry at the end. And 3. It's an inspiring piece of work that will inspire any young budding director that no matter how much they fall down, no matter how much they might fail, to keep going, to keep learning, and to never ever give up on your perfect dream. War of the Worlds' true story is as close to a perfect film adaptation of the War of the Worlds you're ever going to get, and given half the chance, one viewing of this should give your praise to the musical some run for its money.
Judge Kennedy, what is your opinion of Mr. Wells' radio play?
Well, I certainly have an opinion. I think suits should be filed against him and the Columbia Broadcasting System for their wrongdoing. Wells' performance on the radio Sunday evening was a clear demonstration of his inhuman instincts and his fiendish joy in causing distress and suffering all over the country.
I think the reaction was the most damning indictment of the stupidity of the masses.
Now, I appreciate what CBS and radio have done for the world. But why not respect that appreciation and not destroy all faith and confidence we have in the greatest means of getting information about the world, radio?
And finally, by no means the least, we go straight back to the beginning of media, to the earliest days of modern radio broadcasting, in a time where paranoia and fear was at its height, and anything, no matter how bizarre, could be believed if presented in the right context. Orson Welles' original production broadcast Halloween Night in 1938 and brought the entire northwest of America to a standstill. Geniusly crafted as an up-to-the-minute live broadcast, presented with dramatized news broadcasts and the odd interruption of musical interludes, Welles literally put the radio broadcast version of a kitchen table cover dressed up as a ghost and went boo to the United States. Whilst this is still held in so much high regard, it amazes me how little fans of the musical pay it much heed. It's like they think Jeff Wayne took no influence from this version, which given the LP's very realistic epilogue suggests otherwise. One cannot fault the acting, the sound effects, the very atmosphere of a world falling apart in real time around your ears. The eerie howls of the fighting machines as they march up a New York street, spreading their black dust down onto a screaming population, mixed in with the sound of panicking car horns and boat horns, still haunts me to this day. And remember, all this was done literally live and on set in real time. No cuts, no redos, no second chances if they messed up. And they didn't. Not a beat is missed in this nightmarish retelling of the Martian Holocaust. And considering its impact on the public, should be a reminder to us all that even today, in an age where trust around us is falling apart and politicians are encouraging fear of the other, media in all its forms should not be taken for granted, or what comes out of it should be taken at face value. Our reactions to the media can change a political landscape for good or ill, and it remains down to us, the consumer of such media, to keep an open mind and remain vigilant. For the globulous invader in your pumpkin patch could well be the very eldritch horror of political manipulation. So there we have it. My 3 versions of The War of the Worlds that in my opinion better than Jeff Wayne's musical. That's not in any way to diminish the musical masterpiece itself. It still stands centerpiece as my favourite album of all time. But at the same time, I cannot honestly put it up there as my favourite adaptation of all time. It's masterful, emotional, but it's repetitive now. Nothing fresh has come out of it in its 4 decades of endless marketing, which has been successful, and I give no other criticism to that achievement except teasing a surprise announcement for us, only for it to turn out to be another tour of the live show is stretching the reputation of the franchise a little. We've had a promise of a film adaptation of the musical for 25 years now, and still no news. No steps forward, and to be honest, it deserves such an adaptation. But if I also have to be honest, such an achievement should stand on its own merit as a successful marketing enterprise that it actually is, and not on the laurels of some lofty claim that it is the best and only viable adaptation of War of the Worlds on offer to date. It's not that. I'm sorry.